Oftentimes, life takes us on an unexpected journey filled with endless twists and turns. This is even more true for renowned businessman and philanthropist Bonang Mohale. Having worked for 34 years now, he is the definition of a virtuous leader. He has served as president of the Black Business Forum amongst many other roles and is currently at the helm of Business Leadership South Africa. His book, Lift As You Rise, is a collection of his work on leadership throughout the years. I sat down with him to get his reflections on leadership. Let's talk about some of the difficulties that you've met. You chart in the book that you started working on the 17th of April in 1984. The difficulties of entering into a space, especially at that time as a black executive. What was that like?
So 34 years, to be precise. At that time, black people were seen, never heard. At that time, even when you had a PhD in human resources, you could never be called a human resource manager, but a personnel officer. Even if you had a degree in engineering, you'd never be able to get a blasting certificate because our masters at that time, the National Party, believing so staunchly in apartheid, they thought if you gave black people dynamite, they might just get angry and use it against the master. Remember, at that time, our job was to teach white young males the job that we knew for 30 years, so that in 3 months they could become our supervisors. So to get into the job market on the 17th of April 1984, we knew for sure that we had to work 10 times as hard just to be noticed. And then after being noticed, we knew that we'd work for 30 years without any progression of substance. Because remember, it was Verwoerd who even wrote a book, The Architect of Apartheid, who said there's no point in teaching a black child mathematics and science because they will never rise above any form of manual labor. You'll be amazed that even today, some white people, only interactions and interface with black people is as helpers and as gardeners. Therefore, they are so used for 350 years to giving instructions. They have not learned to be able to view black people as equals, let alone to get into a work environment and see a black person as your boss. Therefore, as we teach black people to be at peace with themselves, to make peace with the fact that they are now supervisors, they need to ask rather than give instructions, sometimes to their subordinates and indeed their colleagues. They have to unlearn the old as gardeners and as helpers to take their rightful space in the wider community of nations. Today, 24 years into democracy, it's not unusual that black people and women are still spectators of their own lived experience at the time that young people are telling us that nothing about us, even if it's for us, without us. Hashtag everything must fall has not been internalized, especially by captains of industry, because we still want to tell young people what to do and how to do it, rather than being guided by them. Therefore, what I try to do in the book is to say, let's use an African adage, lift as you rise, because you don't have to be the president, the king or queen, the managing director, before you can extend a hand and lift others as you go up, because Khalil Gibral says those that are helping others are fulfilling God's work. So when we say lift as you rise, this is an affirmation of the 70s black teachers' mass exodus that manifested on the 16th of June 1976, when black students had to learn everything in Afrikaans. During the virulence of Bantu education, when we coined phrases like each one teach one, because we knew we couldn't just leave it to government. This is what we are saying to big companies, to say the best amongst us must lead with the heart of a servant, because servant leadership, it's not a leader that has many servants. This is what we implore, learn, and internalize from the best constitution in the world, because the preamble to our own constitution implores us to recognize and acknowledge past injustices, but it mandates us to fix these injustices. Therefore, Lift As You Rise, it's giving expression to say, as black people with great natural endowments, we now have an opinion. In the context where there are three ideas that have conquered the world, democracy, capitalism, and peace, to say business, human rights, and the legitimacy of capitalism must sit side by side. So I proffer in the book to say, when we think of the role of business as number one, delivering on what you say and what you promise. Number two, we say do no harm. Do no harm to the employees that work for you. Do no harm to where you are located, to the society that surrounds you like Marikana. Do no harm to the environment, because we have not so much borrowed this world from our forebears as we inherited it from our children. Therefore, we need to leave it in a state that is substantially better than we found it in. Therefore, that's why the Lift As You Rise, it's a rallying cry. It's a call that the duration of oppression has never been determined by the oppressor, always by the oppressed. It's only when the oppressed says this much and no more that oppression ceases to exist.
You are passionate about mentorship. You are passionate about other people's developmental goals reaching their peak, and that's just some of the writing that is shared by people who you have helped on a personal basis. What is the role of black executives in lifting as you rise?
The role is to recognize that leadership is being genuinely obsessed with the development of others. Management is the self, not the other-centered. But here we are calling black executives to a higher order to say, can you do things for others expecting nothing in return? Because it's your own moral obligation. Because it's manifestly in our interest to have many of us scaffolding us the higher we go. It is up to us to chronicle and to archive our own history, to be the storytellers of our own lived experiences. Black contribution to civilization has been expunged because we are lazy to document, to write. So people think that African executives, all that they've ever been, is to be hewers of wood and drawers of water, not knowing that the Moors brought civilization to Europe, that it is black people of you, of yours and mine that built the pyramid at the time that we couldn't spell engineering and we lost it. For 350 years we've been oppressed, subjugated, excluded. It's up to us to regain our own self-worth, self-respect, so that we can move forward in space and in time as a people with great natural endowments.
Is the space conducive to do all of that?
It's up to us to create it to be conducive. So when you get into an hostile environment as the workplace, your job as a senior executive is, how do I make this environment to be understanding, to be receptive to a fresh and a new perspective? How do I make it accommodating for women? How do I make it accommodating for black people? Because our job is not to work on individual executives. It's to create the environment, the culture that says any seed that falls upon this soil can indeed grow and bear fruit in abundance. This is the parable of the 4 seeds in action. Our job as black executives is to work on the culture, the environment that is accommodating of many perspectives, because the world cannot be monochrome. It is an outcome of many inputs and experiences, that there is strength in diversity. And again, it reiterates what is contained in the preamble of our Constitution, because it starts by saying, we the people, united in our diversity.